Welcome to the Femsplainers. I'm Christina Hoff-Summers.
And I'm Danielle Crittenden. And we've got a great episode today. We're having
a total Game of Thrones.
No, we're not.
But listeners have demanded.
No, they haven't. This is all lies. This is fake news.
This is not fake news. I just want to vent about how it ended.
Okay, just for the record, this is going to come out literally a week from now that we're talking about it because we're pre-recording it.
People are going to be talking about this for years. There are going to be dissertations, books, movies.
And Zoe and I both don't
lost on
right?
us.
Zoe and I don't watch it.
Okay. This is where I'm going to begin. I'm going to begin with
no.
the Game of Thrones deniers.
I'm
Oh,
not a
no.
denier. I like it. I just haven't. I've watched the first season. I just haven't committed to the rest.
Okay, hang on. No, this is listeners, I promise you this is not a Game of Thrones. We're going to get through this very quickly. I think we agreed, like a divorcing couple, in advance of you would have a point to make about Game of Thrones, and then we'd move on.
Then we'll move on. The point I want to make, and I have two. So I was not initially a Game of Thrones aficionado, but so many people were talking about it that I thought, all right, I'll check it out. And I was impressed. And almost everyone agrees that the first season 1 through 6 were brilliant. And the fact that you just ignored it, the people who, just at the level of the scenery and how they spent a fortune and they curated the best possible materials to make it authentically, really medieval with a mix of fantasy.
Okay, there's great sets and CGI. Come on, get to your point. Get to your point. Okay. We need to get beyond Game of Thrones.
Getting beyond it, there were two groups who had very strong opinions, and they had a meltdown about the last few episodes. And there was one group I sympathized with, and one group I'm horrified by. The group I sympathize with are these fantasy genre fetishists, if you will. Oh, well, that's too strong. They're just people that are obsessed with fantasy. And
and they're nerds.
They're nerds, but they're smart, and they have their standards.
They spend a lot of time in their bedrooms.
Like Ross Douthat turns out to be in that group.
Okay, go.
He just freaked out because they didn't think that it was authentically realized that
authentically realized fantasy.
Yes, because apparently a good fantasy, you develop an entire world.
Yeah.
And it has its own internal logic and plausibility, and he felt that the last few seasons, and especially the last season.
Okay, Christina,
so,
go to your point. Go to your point.
Is it because of the Starbucks cup that showed up in the shot? That's what broke the fantasy.
That was the way that it ended in the character.
Okay, I can't take
and
this.
And this is a spoiler alert. Okay, but then there are the intersectional police women and men who were attacking it for its sexual politics. Now, this has been going on from the beginning.
Beginning of time, really, of feminism.
Yeah. No, the beginning of the series. This series has some of the most fantastically realized female characters. I love them, especially Brienne. She was my favorite. But I loved Arya, and I loved all of them. Dany, I mean, she's bad, but I loved her, and Cersei. But they were monitoring it, and no matter what the filmmakers did, it wasn't good enough. So if you have female heroines, by the end, I think in a way they were so, the writers were so intimidated by this girl power lobby that they only had empowered women. The only people that were capable of claiming the throne were these women. And in the end, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it, don't listen to this. In the end, they're dead. They're both killed.
Yeah, well, that echoes life, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it was
get the woman to come in and clean up, but then she's dead.
Yeah, but then you get this crippled little boy. I mean, he's in a wheelchair, and never mind. I'm getting off into. But what they wanted was a series where not only it wasn't good enough that you had fantastic female characters, fully realized, complicated as the men, as interesting. That doesn't count. but because then they were saying, well, there were too many sex scenes, or there were scenes where women were raped. There's scenes where men were raped. There's scenes where horrible things happened to everyone. And it was about the Middle Ages.
Where fantasy really was a fantasy world where there were dragons. They really existed.
No. Okay. I don't accept that. This was a story. It was based on.
Okay, no. Okay, I can't take this anymore.
Can't take. Oh my.
No, I can't.
I think the dire wolves should be in the throne. I think that the animals should take over, and that should be.
Okay, this is what I have to deal with.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Snobs.
Quick.
You are snobs. You're anti-popular culture snobs.
No, I'm not. Okay. Well, just to prove, Christina, that I am a populist, I went to the Kenneth Branagh movie about Shakespeare called All Is True.
Did see All Is True.
I did see. Well, look, it's great, right? Like, it's a great premise that Shakespeare comes back at the end of his career. He stops writing. The Globe Theatre burns down. He comes back to his wife and family and, takes up gardening and, tries to
interesting. Shakespeare gardening.
Well, apparently he did, but maybe. But he re-enters the atmosphere of the small town Stratford-upon-Avon that he left. I think, okay, this is a pretty good premise for a movie. We know almost nothing about Shakespeare, of course, like in those day-to-day details. And it was so relentlessly bad, I can't tell you. And it wasn't just bad because it was overacted and endless. It went on, and there were endless moody scenes of
Were they
scenery.
Use the same.
No, but here was the thing. William Shakespeare comes home, and he lost a son. He had twins, and one of the sons was a boy, and he died, and he was 9, and we don't even know how, honestly. Yeah, his name was Hamnet, but not. But anyway, he comes home, and all he gets is grief from the women of the household. From Anne Hathaway, his wife, who was a farm girl whom he married because she was pregnant and much older than him, and then this daughters that are left.
So they're angry feminists.
They're angry feminists, and he comes home and he's like, William Shakespeare. And do you think the daughter ever says, so what was it like to write a play that the Queen watched, or gee, those years
fascinate people.
Yeah, or okay, let's maybe talk about some of the things you saw in London. It's all, you weren't here, William. You went away. You left us. Your son died, and we were alone. You just weren't here. And there's all this emotional anger, and he doesn't appreciate her daughter for her literary talents.
It's just to attack.
William Shakespeare.
Even the greatest man, one of the greatest men that ever lived, just cut him down to size.
Well, we took our daughters and they actually left correctly, like, an hour into it. They just said, can we just go home? We're like, okay, but it might get better. I kept hoping it would get better. And we got home and my eldest daughter, Miranda, said, she said, like you were away. Like, a lot of men went away in that era and died. I mean, they would get on boats and vanish, go off to wars.
Invading Normandy. I was here having to do the laundry.
I was having to live our life, Will. And you weren't here when your son died, and it's your fault, and everything was his fault. And oh my God. Anyway, okay, moving on.
Good women, bad men.
All right, so don't see that movie. Okay, so I have...
see Game of Thrones, but although I haven't given away the ending.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, God, it's over.
I didn't really get to my point.
Do you want to talk about Lord of the Rings next? Oh, my goodness.
That's even better.
No, stop. Okay.
You have not seen, you do not like Lord of the Rings?
Okay, no, and we're moving on. As Christopher Hitchens once said, by the way, I once said to Christopher Hitchens, I didn't like Lord of the Rings, and I felt bad of it. The book, not the movies or whatever. And he said, yeah, bit of a chop thing. And I totally agree with that. The minute he said that, I said, that makes total sense. I can't fully explain why. Okay, so I have a story. It's titled, Snapchat's gender-swapping photo filters can result in real transphobia. Christina, do you do Snapchat?
I could.
Oh, talk about the populist. Oh, woman of God. I am all over Snapchat, friend.
I'll do it. I don't.
Okay, but here's what you do. So there's filters, right? Zoe knows all about this. And I have a Snapchat group with my kids. And I found when I get bored, I like to turn myself into Snapchat characters and then do dialogue. It's okay. It's what I do when I'm bored.
Oh, like your karaoke by yourself. Karaoke.
No, I drive my kids crazy because I'll like find a Snapchat filter. Like there was this like old lady with terrible hair, and then I had whole monologues for them, and I send them to my kids. You know, it's just fun. It's like being a character. Okay. Anyway,
Weird, but we won't say anything.
it's like Game of Thrones. Anyway, recently I didn't know this was going to be an issue. I came across the filter that will turn you into a man if you're a woman, and a man can turn himself into a woman, and you get to see what you look like if you're the opposite sex. And can I just say, I was a super hot man. I looked like
It's so flattering.
they do have that kind of wrinkle erasing, thing, but no, I was just like I look like my
kind of
young brother. They give you a beard and things, but it's apparently okay. Yeah, so I was having fun with this and talking to my children. I was making like my Tinder, profile as a man, flipping them out. Anyway.
Well, wait. What would your name be?
Oh, Daniel. Obviously. Daniel.
I'm Chris.
You would just flip it? You wouldn't pick something like spicy and different?
Oh.
No, because that would be,
like
you'd need
Trent?
you'd need the drag queen after that, I think.
yeah.
But anyway.
Is there a drag queen app?
No, but I'm sure it's coming. But anyway, apparently, so as we were having fun amongst ourselves with this filter, we are not understanding or taking the realities seriously of
the sexual politics.
or the trans experience, and that just putting a beard on your face on Snapchat. It says, okay, here is
Isn't that solidarity?
No. Okay, so according to Dana Vivian White, a non-binary speaker and trainer who serves on the board of directors of Collective Action for Safe Spaces, that sounds like fun, believes most cisgender people are enjoying a basic form of gender play without any real thought about TGNC people. Quote, yes, there's a fine line between encouraging people to take genderless seriously and not considering trans realities or carelessly perpetuating misunderstandings about trans identities.
Okay, wait a minute then I'm against drag queens because aren't they imitating women?
Right, without taking...
appropriating the feminine
without
experience.
accepting the reality,
The
angst, and sexism. But but I guess to be fair to Dana Vivian White, you could say, well, what if they did a filter for blackface, right? That would be problematic.
Well, I think there was a controversy where they had like a yellow face type Asian.
It wasn't
Snapchat
see yourself as an emoticon?
Yeah, not as the emoji. Like
that would be
a
fun.
Snapchat filter where it gave you a hat or something that was of an Asian culture, and they got in trouble for that one.
Yeah.
I'll just say one thing, kind of related. There was a book about 10 years ago by a woman named Nora Vincent.
Oh, yeah.
Where,
good choice.
and I don't remember the title, but she dressed up like a guy.
Oh, she did like
me,
except as a
woman
as
dressing up like a man.
Right. Yeah. What was that?
And she concluded, like, women are bitches. She went out as a man. They were so mean. But I thought she was so cute.
As a man.
Yeah, I would have definitely gone out with her.
But she went to bars, but it was interesting because she also, I think, felt a little bit uncomfortable, or maybe just as an imposter in a male culture too, right?
Yeah. Well, she found much more camaraderie, and she went on a bowling league with a bunch of guys, and she was pathetic. And instead of laughing at her, they were just so helpful. They were nice to each other. But then she found...
I thought men always would insult each other in those situations, and like in a jocular way.
There's insulting, but she said beneath it was friendliness and nice. She just found a lot of goodness. And she found some troubling traits, but never mind that. But she was actually, to me, more attractive just sexually as a being, as a man, than because as a
Okay, well, if we don't get in trouble, I promise our listeners that I will post photos
of both
of
of us.
all of
I don't think I'd be as good as
men. Well, we'll see.
We'll see. Who
You will see, and we'll post it on our social media. So
when it came out last week, my boyfriend's family was in town, and his whole family did it. We sat around the table on Mother's Day and did it, and his mom, did it to look like a man. She looked exactly like him. The two of them, put their
it's creepy.
faces
I looked
side
a
by
bit like
side.
my brother. Yeah,
It's weird.
no, but it's also, you realize also, just, and then we can end this topic, but the age thing, it really helps you. As a man, I looked younger, and even to the degree I didn't, it was sort of, ruggedly handsome, can we say? Anyway, so we'll post those. But Christina, didn't you come across a story about how the protests against these extreme abortion laws are evolving, and women are coming up with very creative ways to
creative
protest
and
these?
curious. Emily Ratajkowski,
Emily Ratajkowski.
Yeah, she's Polish.
Oh,
Ratajkowski.
wow. That was
She poses nude
culturist.
to punish old white men for Alabama abortion law. And I'm just thinking to myself, Emily, dear, they may not perceive this as punishment.
It's like Emily Ratajkowski kisses other women naked in front of men to protest abortion. Emily Ratajkowski does a slow striptease on camera.
Emily, I'm
to
looking at
punishment.
a picture.
Oh, she's not really. What's she got? Hang on, she's
She has
got.
a pedal.
Oh, come on!
So she has a pedal over her
Like a
private area.
yeah, like a Venus with a clamshell or something.
But how is this punishing to men? I just don't quite get it. And it seems to me she's confused.
I think this is an opportunity to get your name out there
And your body.
and your
like-
body as a protest. But
And to get Sports Illustrated.
Well, she's already a very well-established model, so that she's done a ton of nude pictures in the past. So I don't think this is a first for her.
so it's not really a protest.
Right. Well, she was arrested during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings for protesting. And that was when she was arrested with Amy Schumer. They were protesting together, and the two of them, the arrest was a pretty light arrest. It was a police officer coming up to them and saying, "Hey, can the two of you please stop?" And they said,
Were
okay.
they posing naked?
No, they just had signs like Women's March style, I think, on the Supreme Court.
Would it be bitchy to say if Amy Schumer did that, it would be a true protest?
that would be punishing. Men.
We can't say that. Sorry,
No, we
take
can't
that
say
back.
that.
We take that back. We take that back.
But I think this is her version of trying to be more of an activist, that she's more than just a model.
Taking it
She's
to the
an
next
activist.
level.
Well, it's sort of a protest self-promotion
Yeah.
in one package.
But as you say, in no way punishing to any man of any color who looks at this who's heterosexual.
Does she? I doubt she seriously believes it because.
Do you think she airbrushed herself? That would be even.
Probably.
Yes. Yes, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. So.
Yeah. Well, I think so. There's actually a group of women that she might want to join if she wants to affect actual change, which are the women who are participating in the No Man 2019 campaign.
What
Have
does
you
that
heard about
mean?
this?
No. What does that mean? No
So-
Man 2019.
There was a hashtag that was started around New Year's that as a New Year's resolution, women would just completely ignore men in any romantic way for an entire year.
Who are these women? Is it massive?
A lot of them. So this was an article that came out at the end of April that was in Vice that's talking about how they're doing 4 months in, basically.
We assume they're heterosexual because it would
Yes.
have no effect if they
Yeah,
were.
exactly. It's from the interviews that were included, it seems that they're all women who went through a traumatic breakup in the last 5 years or so, or a divorce or something like that. But it says that their reasoning is based on frustration, continued disappointment with men, and a need to figure out what it is they really want out of a relationship. So they're not allowed to flirt with men, they're not allowed to have sex with men, they're not allowed to have relationships with men. and
God,
obviously
they should just
no
take
dating.
themselves to a convent or something.
Well, one of the women describes singledom as, quote, the most progressive scenario that you can experience as a woman.
This is why millennials are not getting married, having relationships, and failing to reproduce. I mean,
And they're all and taking drugs for their mental health. I mean, this is crazy. This is not going to be.
But it's, because it's supposed to be this empowering thing that you really get to know yourself. And a woman in the article.
I so don't want to know myself that well.
Well, she said that she had done this before it was a hashtag or before it was a thing. And
Before it was a thing.
And in the end of her year of singledom, or intentional singledom, I think, she met the man who is now her husband.
Oh.
And he said that I was so attracted to you because you totally knew who you were.
Oh, no, he was so attracted to her. This is like old rules, girl. You know, this is like going back to...
It's a new way of playing
It's hard to get.
But this is, so the husband says, the hardest thing about being with you is that I know that you will never need me.
Oh, that's horrible.
But I always say that that's the most powerful thing about being with him because it means I want him.
But okay, here's let's just put this into reverse mode. I would hate it if the man I love said, I don't need you. Like, come on, what kind of attraction is that?
Yeah.
This is a mental illness.
It's a mental illness. It's a generational illness.
It's a whole generation with a mental illness.
Yeah.
Of course, people need each other and depend on each other. And a lot of women, not all, but a lot of women like to feel protected. And
But look, I think men want to feel needed and they want
and cared for.
and they want
and
you
adored.
to feel that they need them. No, this is
It's
okay.
alienating.
This is like so shooting oneself in the foot, like protesting as a beautiful woman naked to piss off white men. You know, not going to work. Sorry, and not having sex and flirting and taking all joy out of interaction with the opposite sex. This is self-punishing. It's nuts.
It's nuts.
All right. Well, we got to get to our guest, Helen Andrews, who we have both followed for a little bit. She's managing editor of the Washington Examiner magazine, but we came across her first on an article that she was published in January in First Things about she was not the first, but one of the first people to have a public shaming. And in her case, it originated not on Twitter, but on C-SPAN. If you can imagine benign C-SPAN, 2010, that pretty much almost and could have completely ruined her life and did for many years. And she wrote just an incredible reflective article about this. And then clearly she's recovered. And more recently, she had an article in the New York Times talking about where the conservative women in these current, you could say culture wars, but
Where are they?
yeah. And one of the women she evokes is Phyllis Schlafly, who was the preeminent conservative woman's leader through the 70s. She spearheaded the anti-equal rights amendment.
She stopped the ERA.
Right. And
To this day, feminist historians look back and of course, they disapprove of what she did, but they're amazed by her ability to mobilize hundreds of thousands, millions of women.
well, I met her in 1988, and she had it wasn't a beehive hairdo, but it was one of those absolute high frozen helmets of hair.
Yes.
And she dressed very self-consciously like a 1950s housewife, like June Cleaver. And I met her at the 1988 convention, Republican convention, where George Bush Sr. Nominated Dan Quayle. And her organization then was thriving. She was this sort of monument. Concerned Women of America. And there was
it was the Eagle Forum.
No, correct. Sorry. Yeah, she was the Eagle Forum, and she had they had a reception. They were a big enough sort of deal that at a convention they would have a reception. I was going through a receiving line, and I met her, And she said that, and she did this all very sotto voce. She sort of leans over and she said, well, I think they should have chosen Henry Hyde, who was this very, tall kind of,
I remember him as a little rotund.
Well,
That was
I think
later.
in his earlier dashing years, And she said, I think they should have chosen Henry Hyde because he's a very manly man. And the men would have supported him. And if the men supported him, the women would have too. I was kind of gobsmacked. I was just like,
She
oh
was,
my God.
I think sometimes I think that she was a troll.
she was an early.
She would begin speeches by saying, before I even say anything more, I want to thank my husband, Fred, for allowing me to be here tonight.
Yeah.
And it would just drive feminists crazy and the libtards.
Well, she was a troll in the sense that she's one of these, and this is, by the way, this goes back through history, these incredibly powerful, forceful women like a Barbara Bush or, just could name half a dozen of them who are forces in their own right. And I think just as a survival tactic, would sort of pay deference to their husbands or to male society, because if they didn't, they felt the whole world and their whole marriage would collapse.
I don't know what
it was, but she was incredible. And it seems weird now to think, well, why would people protest the ERA? And we'll, of course, talk about it with Helen because she mentions this in her article. But the point that I think Helen raises is interesting that, there was, we were just talking about this before the podcast, there was, through the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, there were a lot of conservative intellectual women who were arguing about family policy, family leave, pay, all these issues that are remain of urgent concern.
Family energy in the women's movement, and they were wondering, well, does that really help women? So
Right.
you had people, Betsy Fox Genovese, Jean Elstein, at the Harvard Law School, you had Marianne Glendon.
Marianne Glendon. Well, we could just sit here and name women who were writing books, who were studying policy.
And so they were doing it at a sort of more serious level, the sort of thing that Phyllis Schlafly was doing, kind of the grassroots level. But where are they now?
Right. That it's, and I think Helen, that's the question she starts with, because in a way to talk about, as we were saying with the millennials, like, oh, good luck getting married and having families if you're going to have these sex strikes. These issues maybe just seem too peripheral. I mean, they're not issues that women 35 or 34 and below are really grappling with.
Yeah, but they care about them.
They care about them, but they're not
polls,
even.
They want families. They want majority or 2/3 of women more prefer to work part-time or stay at home.
Right.
And
but
where is the voice of sort of, conventional women or conservative women? It could be, I'm even surprised that there aren't more women leading a movement to stabilize families, because the greatest risk for women is, even though an individual woman can cope with divorce and single motherhood, a culture of single mothers is dysfunctional. And
Right.
we are facing a culture of single
Right.
mothers. And where are the voices,
Well, where's that intellectual counter movement? Okay, so yes, so this is what we're going to explore with Helen. So let's bring her on. Helen, welcome to the Femsplainers.
Thanks so much for having me. Delighted to be here.
And we've made you what you asked for, cocktail-wise, a white Russian. This is a first. This is a first. And you're not connected with the Trump administration. So it's even more surprising that you want a Russian-themed drink.
This is not a white Russian collusion. Although I do collude with Russians in my personal life. I married one.
Whoa. Can you...
My husband is from a family of white Russian emigres. That is, his family fled Russia after the 1917 revolution.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't believe it, but there's a large white Russian emigre population in Sydney, Australia, where he's from. So a sort of thriving community of Tsarist-era Russian culture still existing in the year 2019.
Is it because they wanted the beach or something? Is it like if we're leaving Russia already, let's...
Might as well go somewhere where there's nice weather.
Yeah, it's warm.
Spending 3
I
generations
had a
in Siberia.
white Russian boyfriend in college. He was so handsome. They're good looking.
Mine certainly is.
How long have you been married, Helen, if I may ask? Because this will play in later to our discussion with you.
Yeah, 5 years. 5 years.
Oh, that's wonderful. Helen, we wanted to have her in actually to talk about a bunch of topics. The first one was her most recent article in the New York Times, which is headlined, "Where are the socially conservative women in this fight?" And this fight being general, I think in a general sense. But Helen also wrote, I think, Helen, this was truly one of the most remarkable articles I've ever read. And I'm not, that's not false flattery. I think, Christina, you had the same.
I had the same reaction.
My husband David had the same thing. Like, it was just one of these articles, and it was in First Things. It came out in January. It was called Shamestorm, because can we call you one of the pioneers of being the
publicly shamed before?
Well, just when it was starting,
before
right?
John
Like at
Ronson, was writing about, you were shamed, and
it happened on C-SPAN, and we'll talk about that.
Yes.
But it was, what was remarkable about this article is that I think very few people can go through what you went through and not only describe it, and it was beyond horrible what happened to you.
And that's partly why she ended up in Australia.
That's right. Pro tip: when you get Twitter shamed, move to Australia. But also, and we'll get to this, the incredible compassion for your shamers and self-reflection that you came to after it, I think, was the thing that made it very remarkable. But shall we just start with the socially conservative women, because
Yes,
because
let's
that's
start with that,
because it's interesting. It's you raised a.
I didn't say it wasn't interesting.
You just want to get to the shaming.
I do want to get to the shaming, but
You're just such a gossip, Christina.
no, it's not gossip. It's just
No, it is fascinating.
let's talk about conservative women. Why isn't there an uprising among conservative women defending the family?
Well, a little backstory on the title. Where are the socially conservative women in this fight? I had to specially ask my editor to include "in this fight" in there because I didn't want to sound like I was overlooking all the really great socially conservative women who are out there doing good work and
Right.
life issues and abortion and all kinds of things. But in the particular area of family policy,
Yeah.
work-life balance, whether we should have subsidized daycare, paid family leave, things like that, that's where I really sense just kind of a void in the conversation where the voices of socially conservative women, stay-at-home moms, are just not being heard. And so that's what the article's fundamentally about.
And why do you think that is? Because Christina and I have been through, as you quoted, the mummy wars of the 90s. I remember them vividly, not least because I was a mommy with young kids. But it's true, this was a big topic, and there were many women writing about it, and they represented all sides. And maybe, the people, I remember being one of those myself, who were arguing that, it wasn't just that it was, I wouldn't say it so much as conservative, but if women are going to be able to achieve their dreams, you had to allow that you're going to want to be, with your children for a certain amount of their lives. And it's interesting to me that you point out that isn't even an argument that is going on.
Yeah, on the one hand, we have lots and lots of polling that shows us there are tons of women out there who are staying at home or who are working but wish they could stay at home or just work part-time. So they're out there. It's not that women don't want these things or don't think that way. It's just that they're not represented in the policy debate. Now, the precedent that I found for that, where the conversation kind of worked out in the same way, was the fight over the ERA. That was another case where polls showed there were lots and lots of women who said, we don't want it. We think it's a radical feminist agenda. We think it's going to be, a cornucopia for radical lawyers in the courts to impose on us an agenda that we don't want. And yet, even as late as 1973, everybody assumed the ERA was going to sail through because it had all of the momentum behind them. There were plenty of women in Republican politics at that time. I mean, heck, the head of the RNC was a woman, Mary Louise Smith under President Ford. But none of those active, successful Republican women jumped in to give voice to those women who were opposed to the ERA.
Well, they weren't organized like the women's movement. Movement is key to that phrase. You're right. They were
in favor of the ERA because they hadn't bothered to sort of figure out what it entailed. It was Phyllis Schlafly who.
You mean the women who were not feminists were sort of inclined to be for it?
Everyone supported it.
Because it seems intuitive, right? Like, yeah, I want equal rights.
It was a gesture of fairness. It was a common sense amendment. And many people, Republicans and Democrats, felt that it was just something that the country owed to women. And yet, and Phyllis Schlafly was asked to debate it. And she said, well, I don't know what I think. Let me read it. And then she started looking into it, and she saw what no one had seen before, how it was going to be used. And she went...
Sort of the potential legal repercussions.
Well, she saw that it was going to lead to women in combat. She saw that it was going to lead to canceling everything, girls' schools, boys' schools, and father-daughter dances. And they want
the most important, the most serious.
Those are important.
Which of course, ended up happening anyway.
Right.
Even without the ERA.
Well, they did not accept no for an answer, and the left was better organized, and
Well, also things, and this is maybe where, and I was going to ask you, relating to abortion, is these things that have come about, women in combat, we've talked about this before, have at least come about organically. They haven't been imposed from high by courts. And maybe what has happened to the social conservative women is that they've been now polarized in the abortion debate. And I mean, the pro-life movement, we talk about it as if it's this male thing, and it's really strongly dominated by women. Maybe they've all just moved there and have left the sort of broader policy debate. Is that possible?
I think that's entirely possible. Abortion actually ties into the ERA and why people turned against it. In 1973 was the moment when the ERA went from being inevitable to not happening. And two things happened in 1973. One was Phyllis Schlafly got involved, and two was Roe v. Wade. So that kind of 30 of the states, of the 35 states that eventually ratified the ERA, did so before Roe. So Roe was kind of the moment when people thought, oh no, if we give the courts this language to play around with, they might do really radical things with it.
And I read a lot of feminist historians, and they look at Phyllis Schlafly. Of course, they don't agree with her, but they are in awe of her organizing abilities. And she started maybe the biggest grassroots movement in American history, certainly organizing women, and she did it without, there was no internet. There were no facts.
That's right. It was phone calls
and newsletters and ladies. And she
direct mail. Do you remember that?
Are just sort of envy her, and while they resent her, they have to admit that she was charismatic and she was smart, and she was also kind of a performance artist.
She really was the indispensable woman. She turned that fight around single-handedly. If that one woman, hadn't done what she did, the fight would have gone a different way. I mean, she single-handedly changed history, and there aren't a lot of people you can say that about.
Well, let's look at it from a generational perspective as well. I mean, fewer women. I mean, we talk about the problem with millennials and young women. Marriage is not happening. And so maybe the sort of mummy wars and family policy, it's maybe even way less relevant than it would have been even in the 90s. That if you were to talk to my daughters, who are respectively 27 and 17, they would completely agree that marriage and family is important and that they want those things, and but it doesn't loom as a kind of policy or even political issue on that front. I mean, you pointed out the assumption is we're always talking about the problem is not enough women are able to be in the workplace 100% of their time and not have any time for a life, let alone family. But what have you found about this sort of younger generation? And is that part of the problem?
It is. That it is the case that a lot of young people just don't feel like it's a part of the policy landscape. It's just not something that they're thinking about. And I think that is completely misguided. I think we are actually right now, this year, in the next couple of years, at a really pivotal moment for family policy in this country. For the first time in decades, or possibly ever, the Republican Party, Republican politicians are proposing paid family leave proposals. For the longest time, the Republican Party was really skeptical about it because it sounded like a big new entitlement. For the first time, we have Republican senators putting forward proposals for paid family leave. And of course, on the Democratic side, half of their candidates are really running on things like subsidized childcare. So I think it's probably pretty likely that we will have some form of paid parental leave in the next 5 years. I think that's just
And what will that look like? Because also, as you point out in your article, a lot of it is we need, whether it's universal daycare or subsidized daycare or money to go to daycare, and you point out, well, what if you just give it to families? Is this what let them make the choice. If the dad wants to stay home, fine, like $500 a month or whatever it is, whatever the policy ideal would be. Let them decide, but give them the choice as to whether they want to put it towards daycare or pocket it and not have to put their kids in daycare if that's not what they want to do. Is that the Republican idea?
Absolutely. But it's not enough to just say we want to maximize everybody's choice and leave everybody free to make whatever choices they want to make for their family. You also have to not put a thumb on the scale with federal policies that are nudging people in one direction or another. And if we had something like free universal daycare, that would absolutely nudge families in the direction of having two earners and putting women right back into the workforce maybe sooner than they might otherwise want to be. You can't say we want everybody to make whatever choice is right for them and then say, sotto voce, but we're going to make one choice a whole lot easier and subsidize it.
Well, here's what I see as the paradox. There is a massive amount of evidence that given the choice, the majority of women prefer to stay home with their young child or to work part-time. It's around 20% of women want to, are just these high-powered careerists and want to work full-time, and the assumption of the women's movement is that that's good for everybody, that we should be working towards that goal to have everybody working as much as possible. And this is, I criticize this not as a conservative, but more as a sort of old-fashioned liberal. I want policies that maximize, the satisfaction of people's preferences. And if you did that, you would be looking for ways, for so many reasons, you'd be looking for ways to allow those who want to, it would be mostly women, to stay home with little kids. And you would be you'd want a women's movement that wasn't just about how to have an abortion or how to have, a full-time daycare and get away from your kid. What if you want the child? And what if we had a women's movement that reminded women that when, the best years for having a child are when you're relatively young? And what if we had, an entertainment industry that promoted and informed people about these basic truths? And instead we have quite the opposite, right? Mm-hmm. And you're asking, where is the conservative woman taking up this.
Well, as you
manner.
point out, you don't even have to be a conservative woman.
I do it as
You can just be a woman,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in some ways the answer is really prosaic, which is that the women, who are passionate about making the choice to stay home, don't have time to get involved in politics. They don't have the platform because they're not professional journalists, whereas people who are professional journalists are more likely to be on the other side of the question. Although I'm glad, Christine, that you mentioned that it doesn't have to be the woman who stays home. One of the articles that I cite in my New York Times piece is a piece called Leaning Out by a Princeton grad student called Patrick Brown, where he talks about policy choices that the federal government could make to make it easier for one parent to stay home. And he got the idea for that piece because he was a stay-at-home dad
Right.
for a year while his wife was
And he noted, and it was hard. Well, but you also note in this piece, and again, this is a topic everyone speaks a lot about, is this breakdown in male earnings, male wages, the breakdown in the family. You have an alarming statistic that 20% of prime-age males were not working full-time at the start of 2018. And then you raise something, I want to ask you about this, because even my hair kind of stood on end when you suggested that, well, as long as men earn less than women, it's going to be a problem. So talk about that a little, because I think if you were to go to any woman, and especially a younger woman, if she's conservative, say, you know what, like Phyllis Schlafly, like, honey, you got to take the hit. You got to stop earning as much as man and just step back. Like that's not going to fly now. So talk a little bit about that point that you
but
wrote
would
in your.
you want to marry someone who earned less than you? Most women don't. So that's a problem.
What if he was a band leader who was handsome and could dance? I don't know. That's a tough question, Christine.
Yeah, failed.
Okay.
I think you just described Harold Hill from the music.
Yes, exactly. What about Harold Hill? All right, sorry. So go to that point, because that was where you really, on this article, really sort of walked out to the end, a Wile E. Coyote, like on the end of the point of the cliffs. And I want to hear you talk about that, because it's also a very interesting and important point.
Yeah. Just as a matter of simple justice, I have a moral commitment to equal pay for equal work.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, as Christina points out, you got to meet people where they are. You got to take account of facts. And the facts, as revealed in a David Autor study of the China shock and how it affected different localities differently, found that in places where men's wages went down,
This is not in China, here.
this is here,
Yeah.
in places in America that were hit by the trade shock that came.
Right, so manufacturing and, where traditional male jobs.
That's
yeah.
right. And in those places, when male wages went down, marriage went down. When women's wages went down, marriage went up. Now, that's just a statistical fact that has been observed about the world. And I think that we shouldn't judge facts. We should interpret them.
Well, you also pointed out, I think, too, that when you asked young women, like, what was the most important trait they were looking for in a partner, and it was like a steady job, which was sort of sad. But given where we are today, how do you make that into policy? How do you even sell that? Because I'm not going to sell that to my daughters, and they're very reasonable, fact-based women.
True. But one thing you could sell is saying, look, industries that are dominated by women have been doing pretty okay in this economy. They've seen wage growth. They've seen labor force participation growth.
Describe those areas just so we know what we're
Yoga
talking about.
instructors.
Pink-collar jobs, service jobs, nursing. These are areas where women are well represented, and they're doing fine, or doing all right in this economy. So what if instead we decided to put some policy effort into rehabilitating and nurturing parts of the economy where men are overrepresented, simply as a reaction to the observable fact that men, in particular, are having a really hard time economically right now. More of them are unemployed or staying at home, not even looking for a job anymore. Their labor force participation, even among men who ought to be working, is way down. So let's address that by directing some of our policy attention to parts of the economy where they're represented. That would be one way to address this.
No, and
without
it's
saying we need to pay women less.
Right. So what you're suggesting is we have to recognize that despite all feminism ideology to the contrary, that men are not ruling this country necessarily. They're not doing well. This is your point about boys in education.
Yeah.
And until we can accept that men need help in these areas, and and that also then when you get into the opioid addictions and men dropping out and communities failing and
Yeah, you always hear so many feminists saying, why don't men ask for help more? Why aren't they more open about their feelings and about requesting assistance when they need it? Why do they have to be stoic and all this toxic masculinity? Well, right now men do need help, and a lot of them
Right.
are asking for it.
and we
yet what I
we
see
could say,
from
why don't we offer more help?
Well, the Obama administration, remember the infrastructure bill? And there was all this money that was going to go to building bridges and restoring tunnels. And immediately when this bill came before Congress, the women's groups mobilized and said, aha, it's going to, history's going to repeat itself. It's going to be all men, like back in the, with FDR. It's going to be men who get the jobs. And they insisted there's an emotional infrastructure and women should get the money. And then there was
Wait,
actually,
we can't say women have an emotional. Isn't that sexist?
well, that's what they said.
Okay.
And it turned out that I don't know, some bridges and tunnels were fixed, but a lot of money went to whatever that is, the emotional infrastructure, to social workers, and I'm just telling you, it's very hard to do anything to help men. But as I've pointed out, if you don't help men, then you hurt women. But that's not a message.
Well, that's what Helen's saying too. So, okay, so Helen, before we get on to shaming, what would be your shout out to conservative women? Like, what would be the best thing they could do? Unless again,
Well,
women. Let's not say
leader. They need
let's
a charismatic
not say
leader. And that should be you, Helen.
But policy-wise, so how do we frame this? How do we say, we need to do this, and what would be the bumper sticker? What would we do?
I said earlier that we are looking down the barrel of some very specific policy fights that are going to happen in the next year or two. And one of them is paid family leave, and the other is subsidized childcare or subsidized daycare. I think in both of those, we need to have women standing up saying nothing that disadvantages stay-at-home moms, nothing that puts a thumb on the scale in the favor of one family model or another.
And you could even do this gender neutrally, like the guy who's coming up with the policy who was a stay-at-home dad. You don't have to make it about mothers. I mean, even though they will be probably the people who most take advantage of these things, you could just we're promoting families, we're promoting those who also want the choice to have someone stay home. So that's fair.
The piece of feedback that I got the most on this article was, well, gosh, a one-earner family sounds like a nice thing, but there are a lot of families for whom two earners are just an economic necessity.
Right, because also wages have gone down and families are. But then you're lucky if you even have two earners in a family these days, right?
There's that. But the thing I always respond to that is that, for all of the history of this country, there have always been a certain proportion of families who, because of economic hardship, have needed two earners in the paid workforce. But in 1960, that proportion was about 15%, whereas now 2/3 of married couples have two earners in the workforce, 2/3 of married couples with kids. So when you're talking about 2/3 of families, married families even, you're not talking about people who are in poverty. You're talking about a huge chunk of the middle class. Why can't the one-earner model work for them anymore? So that's clearly a big problem. And I think
And it's a problem no one's looking into.
And we are on the verge of doing things that might make it a lot worse.
See, yeah.
So we need to make sure, at the very least, that we don't do that.
Well, and to be fair, even if you have a child credit, like the best possible policy to help, whether it's the dad or the mom stay home, you still have the threat of divorce. I mean, the underlying thing, and you do point this out, the crumbling of the family. Like a woman, let's just say it's the woman who, takes that time out. It's very hard to economically make up for that in your lifetime. And if a woman doesn't have the security of a marriage, or the security of, if the marriage breaks up, will I get or have the support I need? I mean, that's also a problem, right?
That's true. Although very often I hear women say, of course, I need to keep on top of my career so that I can be independent. I don't want to be dependent on my husband. But of course, even working women are not independent. You are dependent on your employer. Or very often, mothers without husbands are dependent on the government.
Right.
So if your choice is between various kinds of dependence, I think the kind that is dependent on somebody who's made a vow to take care of you.
The anthropologist
has a lot
Lionel
going
Tiger called it bureaugamy, women married to the state.
I used to joke, who would you rather wake up to in the morning next to you, a husband or the state? Okay,
The state's pretty
hot. All right, should we move on to the shaming? Do you want to just, Helen, for our listeners, just
tell us what happened.
in a nutshell, just tell us what happened?
Yeah, I'm going to pick up my White Russian.
Yeah, you have. I'm sorry, you have not been able to have a sip.
Hard
Can you mix a
policy
White Russian with
Rosé? That becomes a pink Russian, and then it's communist.
I mean, can you drink both and not have reverse effects?
You could try that and be our crash test dummy for that one.
As the resident bartender, I would recommend against. That would be
That's right. Zoe, by the way, is moonlighting as a bartender.
I am.
Have you seen people do that mix?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not.
It's always bad, right?
I have seen someone put a shot of Bailey's in red wine.
No,
I'm not.
No, how drunk were they?
Not drunk.
No, that's not my question.
Very old
All
woman.
right, I've been misunderstood. I was not going to put it in the rosé. I was going to independently take a glass and have the same drink and just mix my drink.
You know what? I didn't make enough White Russians for you, friend. You're stuck with your actually really gross rosé that you brought in today, and it's really bad. I'm not even going near your rosé. I'm having my bespoke gin and tonic.
Okay, moving on.
Okay, moving on. Let's go to shaming. Okay, so in a nutshell.
When I was a few years out of college, so a very young writer just starting out.
2010, right?
Gosh, now I feel old.
No, sorry. Well, hey, join the club.
And you were a recent graduate of Yale University?
That's right. And I was invited to contribute to an anthology of essays by young conservative writers called Proud to Be Right, with an introduction by Jonah Goldberg, AEI's own.
Yay!
Jonah.
He's been in this studio many times. He has his own podcast.
He just comes in here for the bar, I bet.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't get the bar. It's only for our guests.
And in order to promote this anthology, they put together some, book panel events, the way you do when you have a book out. And so I appeared on one of them with one co-panelist who I didn't know, another co-panelist who was Jonah, moderating, and a final co-panelist who happened to be my ex-boyfriend. And he...
Nightmare.
Yeah, I decided it would be fine. I was going to be professional. But he decided, midway through the Q&A, to just kind of go off on a rant about me and how terrible I was and how I'd been a bad girlfriend and was generally a psycho. And just...
Was any of this true?
It's important to say, in Todd's defense, his name is Todd Seavey, that he didn't say anything he didn't believe.
Okay, that's different. He could be schizophrenic and
were
believe you were the devil.
Were you a bad girlfriend?
Were you?
I absolutely was. That is completely true.
In what way?
And I can only say that I was 22 at the time. I think a lot of people are not great at relationships when they're 22.
I did some bad things.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had 22-year-old women have no morals.
I had no morals. I was
Anyway.
mean to
Yeah,
some-
although he did add some things to his rant about my political beliefs that I can say are
So hang on,
that was weird.
just to set this up. You're on like C-SPAN, the driest panel in the world. You're there to talk about, what was the topic?
Conservatism in the 21st century.
Okay, but
Your
suddenly-
ex-boyfriend stands up and goes
That
on a rant
woman.
about you personally.
Yeah.
Like you're the scarlet letter of girlfriends or
C-SPAN.
something. C-SPAN.
Next to him. I was 6 inches away from him. He had the chair next to
Were
me.
you on good terms before this, or so you thought, or?
So I thought.
And you knew it was being filmed, of course.
I did know it was
And what is going on in your mind?
You can see in the footage the wheels turning.
Oh my God.
Some people have asked me afterwards, how did he get away with it? Why didn't somebody stop him?
Yeah.
Tackle him
Why-
or
yeah.
punch him in the face or take the microphone away? How was he allowed to go on
Right.
for so long?
Good question.
The answer is everyone was just kind of blindsided. They had no idea how to
Could
process
you
what
have,
was happening.
I mean, this is all, 20/20 hindsight, but could you have said something like, maybe today you would have, I think that's very inappropriate and personal, and you could have pulled a whole thing today, but at the time it was just...
Yeah. Although I did get in a pretty good zinger. Actually, this was the only of all the aspects of this situation to be annoyed about. This is probably not the one that should have been at the top of my list. But the end of the story is, of course, that this 4-minute rant was clipped on YouTube and went viral. But I was annoyed that they clipped the end of the video before I got in my zinger.
What was your zinger?
Todd concludes his rant by saying, after having, descended to such depths of depravity, is there anything that you do consider immoral? Any low to which you would not stoop?
Oh my God.
And I paused and thought for a minute and said, I think spilling your heart out on C-SPAN.
Oh, they cut that?
I was really...
So you would be like a heroine today for that.
Okay, we gotta get that video and post.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Please don't.
I take it back.
But the important thing about this was, okay,
good.
so you're on a panel. An ex-boyfriend goes wild. It's a nightmare, obviously. And it doesn't matter what he says because it's completely inappropriate. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. He's just like he must have loved you a lot. Can I just say that? Because to do this impassioned thing on television.
See, that's what I would think. If a boyfriend did that, I would partly be mortified and partly like, you see, hopeless.
Yeah, but the world didn't respond that way because, as you pointed out, it was 2010, and this thing then gets edited, put on YouTube, and your life is destroyed. I mean, tell us what happened from there.
A lot of surreal things to begin with. I would just be walking down the street or on the subway and somebody would stop and point and say, hey, C-SPAN girl. That happened
Only in D.C., by the way.
in New York and D.C.
Oh, really?
No, at first you thought to yourself, well, maybe this, who watches C-SPAN, just like...
Yeah, I thought, no, this will be fine. But eventually, about a year after that, I decided I wanted to move on from my job at National Review, but I found that I just wasn't getting the callbacks when I sent out my resume that I was kind of expecting, that a lot of people were reluctant to bring on somebody who had as their first Google result something like this. And other people have kind of commented to me afterwards, well, that sounds weird, because surely any rational person looking at this would think, well, he's a psycho and she's the
Yeah,
victim.
right.
Right.
But it does plant a seed of doubt, and that's all it has to do. I think if I were an employer looking at that, I would go away from it thinking, okay, 98% chance he's just a crazy person. But do I really want to take a gamble on the 2% that she might actually be psycho? Do I have any other candidates who have never been called
Right.
psychopaths on
Or
national
he's going to
television?
end up in our office all the time,
Well, no, but I
Stalking
think
you.
no, but you're right. Like, even if you were super sympathetic to your situation, you would have to be in a corporate setting, almost altruistic, to say, "I'm hiring Helen Andrews, and I don't care who knows it." That's not corporate America.
Yeah, so what I ended up doing was moving to the other side of the world. I had the good fortune to be dating the white Russian Australian now husband.
Did you meet him in D.C.?
Met him in D.C. And he...
So you didn't have to go, like, you didn't have to exile like a old prisoner to Australia
Right, I was
to
not-
meet the
not
person.
Convict transportation. Where I showed up and, started my life anew. No, I had a base to work from.
Okay, so he was here. And okay, so we'll post, obviously, this Shamestorm article, as it's called, from First Things On, I think. But so how, and you can read the whole horrible thing, but how was it? Okay, so I presume you go on a date with your white Russian, as we're going to call him now. And does he know about this? Like, how do you date with this Google fact about you?
Tim was in the room when it happened.
What, your
My current husband was in the audience during the fated book panel in Georgetown University.
Oh, so he was protective of you.
Well, no, he said this girl must be so way hot
Yeah.
that,
She drives men insane.
and now I have an opportunity to be a white knight as well as a white Russian.
Yeah, I did ask him afterwards, saying, "Honey, I'm not saying you should have, but can you tell me why you didn't go up and punch Todd Seavey in the face?"
Yeah.
It was a little early. If he had been your husband or boyfriend at that point, I think that would have been correct.
Would have been a little early.
But he saw, give him this credit, he saw his opportunity.
Although, to be fair, moving to Australia did not actually solve the problem in quite the way that I thought it would.
Wait a minute. People can Google in Australia.
You have Google?
Wait. No, but hang on. Just 1 second. How quickly did he ask you out after the panel?
We had been dating at that point. Tim was there as my date.
Oh, so maybe this set the X off, maybe.
That could have been it.
Yeah.
Could have been.
Well, not that that's an excuse, but still. Okay. So you started dating before this happened. So he was already locked in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe you should have punched the guy up. But anyways, but then you go to Australia and you think, I'll start a new life. And of course, they do have Google in Australia. And tell us what happened.
It was about 18 months before I found a job there. And once I did find a job at a think tank there, as soon as I put out my first report, an Australian parliamentarian tweeted it and then tweeted a link to the video saying, "This report on the regulation of nonprofits is clearly invalid because I don't care what this crazy lady has to say about it." You know? So I did a lot of TV appearances in my capacity as a think tanker down in Sydney. It would usually come up in my Twitter mentions when I was on TV. It just was unavoidable. People would come up and ask me about it. And even after I married my husband and took his name, even though the Google results were still under my maiden name, it was still a big part of my life.
So it's a metaphorical ball and chain that you
Is there
have
any
to.
way to escape it? I mean, I've heard that in Europe they're more forgiving and they order the internet, Google to erase, but it's actually not possible to erase it because
No, you had to come to a kind of philosophical, which was, again, this was the really profound part of your article.
you cite a great line from Aaron Sorkin about bad publicity, that it's like seasickness. You think you're going to die and everybody else thinks it's funny. The seasickness, I don't just think I'm going to die. I want to die. And even my little, experience with being, people piling on for this or that on Twitter or something, it's a terrible experience. You feel frightened. And then you think, oh, well, this is going to stop. No, it's not. You see that it's,
Well, you carried this, where are we, 2019 for 9 years?
The funniest incident of it coming back was right when I decided to write this essay. Because, of course, this happened a long time ago, and it has been kind of a big part of my life for a long time, but I've never written about it. And one of the reasons is that I didn't want to bring it all back up.
Yeah. Why start up?
Yeah, don't make your Google results any worse.
Yeah.
But while I was contemplating whether or not I wanted to revisit this and sort of share what I learned, I was with my husband in New York City, and he was at a conference of free market activists, because that's what he does. And just at their lunch table, they were talking about, bad breakups in the conservative movement, just as fun, gossipy lunchtime conversation. And one guy at his table literally said, oh, if you want to know about bad conservative breakups, you have to watch this. And pulled out his iPhone and put the C-SPAN video, not knowing that he was talking to someone who is now married to me.
But he shut it down, right? He did shut it down.
He did.
Right.
Didn't punch him in the face.
He didn't punch him in the face.
Why do you want? There doesn't have to be punching.
We're against punching.
No, I'm kind of for
punching
it,
is good.
in that instance. but you had the point, I think, that you made in this article, which took it to the level of, profound, was, and I sense that you're religious, and you were looking for a way not just to forgive yourself, but to forgive this wretched boyfriend who brought this all upon you. And you also identified with many ordinary people who have completely lost their lives through, and it doesn't matter whether it's Me Too or, some YouTube bad tweets that they've lost. I mean, it's like a death penalty leveled against people who have not committed capital crimes. You're not allowed an explanation. It's worse, actually. There's no lawyer. You're not allowed a self-defense. And as you pointed out, there are people who have just committed suicide in these instances. But tell us how you came to this level of forgiveness, which to this guy, Todd...
It's actually pretty easy to forgive Todd because he's really a genuinely nice guy. And
it doesn't sound like it.
Very badly, and so I have a lot of compassion.
Yeah, I don't know.
To answer your question, after this happened to me, I kind of started doing a lot of reading about people who had been publicly shamed, and it started happening a lot more often. I was kind of an early trendsetter in this online.
You're patient
viral thing.
zero.
Yeah, it's like nobody. I think, as Rob Lowe said, and by the way, his amazing autobiography, the actor.
He's another early one.
Yeah, he was like, you never want to be first. He was like the first videotape.
Yes.
Yes.
Another pioneer in that.
Yeah. No, you don't want to. He says you don't want to be that person.
No,
but yes.
But it has since become a lot more common.
Yeah.
And, well, one of the things I noticed was, as you mentioned, that a surprising number of people who've been through it do commit suicide. So this is clearly like a serious thing that can ruin people's lives. But the thing I found that surprised me the most was that in looking at these stories of people, in this decade who have been publicly shamed, and then looking at the past and historical examples, like Oscar Wilde is somebody I talk about, who had huge shame eruptions in their lives, I found...
Sent to prison.
Yeah. I found that it actually didn't make a whole lot of difference whether the charge was accurate or not. You have some people who are shamed for things they didn't do, but then you have some people who are shamed for things that they did do and that they feel bad about. And the emotional aftermath is actually identical in both of those cases. The kind of fear and panic and humiliation and just wanting to run and hide, all of that stuff is the same, no matter whether you're guilty or not guilty. And, as I started reflecting on which of those two categories I fell into, on the one hand, I came to the conclusion that, I was kind of not on a great path as a human being when I was 23.
Oh my God, no one's on a great path as a human being at 20.
Be that as it may.
Rarely.
The signs were not pointing in the right direction. And, I don't know if I deserved what happened to me, but that's not a question that I'm interested in the answer to. What happened to me ended up making me a better person. And that's kind of what I want to focus on.
Well, you quote Oscar Wilde, and you said, he said, I learned many things in prison that were terrible to learn, but I learned some good lessons that I needed. But I don't know that you deserved
Wilde to have had those lessons, and I don't want you to have had them.
Like, they were so extreme.
It's too harsh. It's too much, and that's what's wrong with this culture of internet shaming. And I think we're going to have to find a solution, because any new technology There was a time, not in my lifetime, I don't think, but maybe, where you could go to a shoe store and they had a little X-ray machine, and children could, like, for fun, get X-rays of their feet. Like, X-rays were fun. And then
Where is this going?
wait a minute, what was I saying? No, the technology. Well, in this case, it turned out to be toxic,
Gives you
poisonous.
cancer or whatever.
And in the case of this technology, where now here we
point.
are with this capacity to say something denigrating or to humiliate someone, and the whole world can watch. This is new. This is uniquely punishing. It exacts a horrendous psychological toll. It's sort of
Oh, and life toll, right?
life toll. And I think that it's sort of like, X-rays for fun. No, public shaming for amusement. I think that we're going to have to, I don't know how, but find a way to eliminate this.
Mob rule. Well, you had a couple of pointers on this.
Yeah, well, just I think we really do need to emphasize the point that we are in an unprecedented situation. I mean, public humiliation has always been a part of human society. You had people in the stocks and you'd throw fruit at them and all that kind of stuff. But today, on the one hand, it is global. So you can't go to another
town.
Australia, or move down the road to a different state. That's not going to work. And it's also permanent. I mean, you're right, the EU has tried the right to be forgotten and the scrubbing of Google results, and maybe that technology will get better, I don't know. But for the time being, public shaming is, for the first time in human history, global and permanent.
Maybe we should shame people who publicly shame.
Well, this is kind of what you said. It's like
Yeah,
you have to know yourself. When you click on something or thumbs up it or pile on, you are part of the mob.
You are adding clicks, and you are telling the editors and proprietors of the website you are visiting that running this kind of story is something that will be rewarded.
Right.
So I don't know that I have a macro solution. I think we probably need some. But for me, there are just some personal changes that I've made since this has happened to me. And one of them is that I don't click on shaming stories, even if it's someone that I really dislike, or it's someone who's being shamed for something.
Like a celebrity or...
Yeah, or if the shaming is somehow in line with my ideological preferences, that's really tempting. But I've decided there are some things in the world that aren't any of my business, that if they happen to me, I wouldn't want other people to know about. So if it's not any of my business, and if it's not newsworthy, then I don't click on it. And another thing is that I've discovered a surprising amount of solidarity among those of us who have been at the center of these shame storms. A lot of people who had been through something like this reached out to me.
Oh, is there a network?
There is. There's
Of the canceled and the shamed?
The Canceled and the Shame Survivor Network. It's going to be a nonprofit coming to you soon.
We have a
I
support
hope.
group. We all meet in
Yeah.
Christine Sacco's living room.
Yeah.
But that's, it's made me, I think if I were ever in a position to interview somebody or hire somebody or throw some work to somebody, I think I'd probably make a conscious effort to overlook a story like that. And another thing is just a really small thing, but a lot of people that I talk to who have been at the center of these shame storms have told me the same thing, and I'm kind of surprised at how often it recurs. But they say, when I see this happen to somebody else, I just shoot them an email. Because the worst thing that you feel in the first week is being terribly alone. You feel like everybody's against you and nobody's on your side, and it's just little old you against a huge...
Yeah, and also not just by yourself, a sense of abandonment by all of your friends. I once said to my husband, we've been through similar things, not like quite like this. We didn't have to move to Australia, but I remember David saying to me, and he said, well, at least we know who your friends are. And I said, I don't want to know who my friends are because it's really sad to know. And the people who surprise you are the people who are not your closest friends. They come out of the woodwork because, as you say, they identify with what you're going through, and they have maybe reached that extra level of compassion where it's like when people get ill or whatever, that you suddenly realize that there are other people who have gone through the same illness that you have, and suddenly they're there. They just appear. And it's an incredible feeling to have that kind of compassionate support, I guess, from people you didn't expect it.
Mm-hmm. And I think we really just need to give people room to change. Because there are some people who are publicly shamed for pretty bad stuff. Certainly not everybody in the Me Too movement who's been caught up in that and accused during that is entirely innocent. But you always want to leave the door of redemption open. And I worry that that's what public shaming slams shut.
Before you go, can you just tell our listeners, again, this was part of the profound aspects of your article, you met your ex for coffee or cocktail, whatever it was, after this, and it was your initiation. You wanted closure of some kind. Tell us what happened on the last time you met him, when you sort of said, are you happy? What happened?
Yeah, I talked to him a few times, not for the first, 3 or 4 years after it happened. But after that amount of time had passed, I would email with him infrequently, but from time to time. But one thing that had never come up was whether or not he was sorry or whether he regretted what he'd done.
Right. Was this worth it, Todd?
I had always kind of wondered.
Yeah.
So when I decided that I was going to write this piece, I wanted to get his voice in there and his perspective. And I really couldn't resist asking, if you had it to do over again, would you do it? And the answer I got back was, I have become a big believer in dealing with things privately. In the future, if I ever get married, if my wife stabs me, you will not hear me shouting in public about it.
Okay. I don't think he's going to have a wife. Can I just say that? Well,
fantastic article. I mean, one of the most important articles.
It really is. And there's just like so many things to come from that. Like, this is, as you say, this is a new problem that we're going to have to deal with.
Except just one little thing I'm going to add that's worrisome.
What?
And Heather mentions in the article that some of the most effective shamers, and I won't name them to shame them. What the hell? Maura Donegan. She published the Shitty Men in Media list.
Yeah.
And you get rewarded.
Yeah, you pointed this out. She got a book deal.
During the controversy over the Shitty Media Men list, the first fight to be fought about it was whether or not the person who started the list should remain anonymous. And you had a lot of people, especially on the left, saying, we need to keep Moira Donegan anonymous and not out her, because if we out her as the person who created this list, bad things will happen to her. She'll get harassed online. And I remember before she was outed thinking, I bet whoever turns out to have created this list is going to have only good things happen to them. I bet they're going to get a book deal. I bet they're going to be vaulted into fame.
Right, talk
and in
shows.
fact, that is precisely what has happened to Moira Donegan.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, Helen, on that happy note, thank you for coming by. You are an amazing person. You are an inspirational person. Maybe you should write an advice book about what to happen. But thank you. We're so thrilled to have you on.
Thanks for having me and for the cocktail.
Yeah, the White Russian.
Can I have one now? No.
Christina, you know how every summer we drive up north, my family, to our cottage in Canada. And what always terrifies me on arrival, that first time when you go to open it up, is that you're going to find mice have been all through your bedding and torn them up and gone into your pillows. And it flips me out. I make David go in ahead because I can't deal with what the mice have done over the winter. So this year I had a plan. one of our great sponsors is Brooklinen, which makes incredible sheets, sheet sets, duvets, pillows. They even do towels. They do everything you need. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to be ready to replace, everything if I have to with Brooklinen sheets, but not least because it's such a good deal.
Well, it's not only a good deal, but they have the best reviews. They're the winner of the Best of Online Bedding category by the Good Housekeeping. They've got rave reviews from Business Insider, Apartment Therapy, Men's Health, and something like 35,000 plus 5-star reviews. And it just better than any other online bedding company.
Well, I hope that doesn't mean the mice are going to really give it 5-star reviews too, but it is very high quality bedding, luxury hotel level, but not at luxury prices because they work directly with manufacturers and the customers, so there's no middleman. It's like you're getting great bedding, but at wholesale prices.
Well, my Brooklinen sheets are probably the best, most comfortable sheets I've ever slept on. And I'm very choosy about sheets, so now it's your time for your upgrade. You get 10% off your first order and free shipping when you use the promo code FEMSPLAIN at brooklinen.com.
It's an exclusive offer just for our listeners. In fact, Brooklinen is so confident in their product that all their sheets, comforters, and towels come with a lifetime warranty. Hear that, mice? The only way, though, to remember to get 10% off your first order and free shipping is to use promo code FEMSPLAIN at brooklinen.com. That's BROOKLINEN.com, promo code FEMSPLAIN. And Christina, does he ever rip up the sheets?
No, she's a perfect little... I won't say. Well, she's so impressive.
Her level or her ability to forgive is amazing. And I think that's the thing that I took away from this article, and we talked about at the end, of course, is you have gone through this life-ruining ordeal, and how do you surmount it? And I think this is, as we're talking about, this is a real question for our times. Like, these people haven't been convicted of something. They're not, and yet they've been given a kind of metaphorical death penalty.
And there's
that they
nowhere
can
to
never
go.
appeal to.
Can't
really
be appealed. They can find just nowhere where are people willing to listen.
Right.
But actually, she gave up people a path to redemption.
Right. Well,
she suggests the need.
To suggest the need. And that's I think that's going to be a profound issue. It's like, I don't know, where is it, in Hades or in the circles of hell, like, there must be some level for the non-person, the shades that...
Oh, good. We've got to rewrite Dante's Inferno and have another cycle of hell where you're
condemned to be this shade
and shamed.
And try and get back your flesh and soul.
No, you don't get it back so easily.
Yeah, okay. So, moving on. On that happy note, Zoe, we have some little reader reactions.
We do. So I have an interesting listener reactions that come from an episode that was a bit of a while back, but a good one, when we covered ecosexuals.
Oh, I don't know if I can speak about ecosexuals.
So...
Do we need to say what they're people have sex with trees,
plants,
waterfalls,
mulch,
dirt,
mulch.
the earth.
I like mulch. What do you want? I don't want to be shamed.
Well, we got
Does the mulch like you, Christina?
It's not. The consent is still an issue.
A lot of people brought that up in the comments.
It is
Actually,
mulch consent.
But I think the funniest batch of listener reactions came from this topic. We have very funny listeners.
We do. We have very witty listeners.
So,
we appreciate it.
This particular one comes from Andrew, who is Australian, because we have all of our Australian friends.
Yeah, because also it originated, I think,
Australia.
in Australia.
Yeah, that was the original shame.
Yeah, and you think that's kind of weird, given all the weird nature they
Well,
have.
that's what he talks about. So this is, I can't do an Australian accent, so you're just going to have to,
No, you can't.
imagine.
Come on, Sheila. No, that was bad.
So he says, try any of that nonsense in the Aussie bush, and your cozy little lovin' with a friendly fern is likely to be gate crashed by a red-bellied black snake, funnel web spider, or worse still, the dreaded drop bear.
What is a drop
I don't
bear?
know.
Oh my God, we have to Google
We
that.
do. He says it's a bit too risky to do that down under, which is totally true.
Yeah, and like, you know, just even the simple things like ticks and termites. It's just, anyway, okay, yeah, good.
And the jellyfish,
good-
the box jellyfish.
Good point, mate. Good on you, Bruce. That was a good point. You're a good Bruce explainer.
And then Matt said, wow, I thought I was going to have to wait until Halloween to wear my Groot costume. I guess not.
What?
Groot? Do you not know what Groot is? Have you seen any of the like Avengers superhero movies?
Okay,
Okay,
as you
okay.
know,
Alright,
I am
alright.
not culturally.
Groot is a tree. And he is a tree that is a superhero. And the only words that he says are, I am Groot. That's how he responds to everything.
Groot.
But he says it like very matter-of-factly. So he's this tiny little tree that can like fight superheroes and supervillains and stuff. And so
Well, at least he has a personality.
I think
You could
maybe-
get to know. You could
Right.
have at least a Tinder
where this is
profile.
Are you
coming
saying
know?
mulch doesn't have personality?
No.
well, I'm pretty sure that Bruce Willis does the voice of Groot. So like maybe that's where this movement is stemming from. People are attracted to his performance.
Oh no.
And I think Claude summed it up really well. He just said, you know what, I don't mind if people do this if that means that they won't be reproducing.
It's you're weeding out. This is
Exactly.
but
Natural selection, literally.
then what are we left with?
I don't
know now with the girls off on their own and the
We're left with Game of Thrones fans is what we're left with.
Can we go back to that?
No, we
I
can't.
I have a very fun activity for us to do.
Okay.
So recently I discovered that Planned Parenthood has created an app. Maybe the ecosexuals could use it because maybe it could answer some of their questions. But it is an app that
Does
is
mulch
called
have consent?
Right, exactly. So it's an app or a website that you can go to. It's called Roo with ROO.
Like Roo.
Yep, like a kangaroo.
Yeah.
.plannedparenthood.org. And so what you do is you just fill out a couple questions asking about yourself, and then you get to ask Roo all of your sexual questions.
Oh, can we call?
Can we call? Can we
So
do
it's
it?
not a call, but I have the app open.
Okay.
So the first question is, what's your gender? There are options: female, male, trans man, trans woman, non-binary, or name your own.
What can we be? Can we be Groot?
Groot.
Groot.
All right,
Okay,
name your
Groot.
own.
We're Groot.
Groot.
Yeah.
Oh, let me type it in. All right, what comes next? It says Groot. Nice one. Let's get started.
Okay.
Take me to Roo. Okay. Hey there, I'm Roo. So it's a little dialogue that pops
Yeah.
up. You can ask me questions or browse through topics for more Q&As.
Okay,
Now
let's
there's
just
a box for us to
This
ask
is
a
like
question.
this is like Siri, but for sex questions.
All right, so what's our question?
Okay, I got one.
Ready.
Rue, my mom says masturbating will make me blind. Is this true? Do you have to type it? You
Yeah,
can't just
will
talk to
make me blind.
Is this
Is
true?
this true?
What does Rue say?
Go. Rue says, the whole masturbating makes you go blind thing is a huge old-timey myth. Masturbation doesn't cause blindness or affect your eyesight in any way.
Wow, so Rue is prepared for that
Right,
question.
and it says if you want more info, there's a link that you can click.
Oh, okay. Do you have a
I
question?
think that's fake news.
Do you have a question for Rue?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Rue, is it wrong for an ecosexual to have intimate adventures with mulch before marriage?
Rue knows nothing about ecosexual.
What?
Rue
What did
says,
Rue say?
Sometimes we robots have a hard time understanding humans. Could you ask me in a different way?
Okay. Can a tree give consent?
Okay.
Let's try that.
Can a tree...
I feel like some 13-year-old doing prank calls.
The only topic that came up when I searched that was, do I need to give consent if someone is my partner?
Oh,
So I guess
a tree can't.
A tree can't.
Okay, let's try another old wives' tale.
Okay.
Oh, no, let's give it a moral question. Okay, Rue. I think I should be a virgin when I get married. What do you think? This is a moral question. Let's see if a robot can answer a moral question.
So the only 3 questions are, does stretching your hymen open mean you are not a virgin?
Oh!
I am a virgin and my partner isn't. Is that bad? And when are you no longer a virgin?
Do the second one. I am a
Virgin and my
What
partner.
does it say?
It says, it's totally normal to be in a relationship where each person has different sexual experiences. Be honest with each other and communicate what you're comfortable with and what your boundaries are. And remember, it's never okay to pressure someone to have sex.
Okay, well, that kind of answered my
A
question.
bit.
Sort of.
I don't know.
Well, okay, you know what? I think we should just like
Well, let's come
consult
back.
Rue.
Let's
let's
come
come
back.
back.
And maybe
Consult
Rue will get a little more.
Okay, so when you open up the questions, it has popular ones that
Oh,
are asked
okay.
the most
Okay.
frequently. The first one is, how do I tell someone I like them? Which I guess is kind of a sexual question.
Kind of. Like, does that mean I want to go right to
It says
third base? I don't know.
it can feel awkward or scary, but the best thing to do is just be direct and tell them and ask your crush, how they feel.
Oh, bad advice, Rue.
You can't know how it will turn out, but either way, the most important thing is to be open, honest, and treat the other person with respect.
Okay, I'm going to do that tonight at dinner with you.
Well, you're gonna.
I like you.
Oh God, Christina, we've gone over this on the podcast.
Thanks, Rue. Didn't work.
Okay, I think we're at the end of it. I think we're at the end of this podcast, and
I'm gonna go ask Rue some more questions.
oh, just quietly. Will you get warts, Zoe? I don't know.
Those the herpes issue.
That's the thing. Rue lets you pick your gender. If you're gonna pick Groot, she should have answers to each sexual questions.
How often do I need fertilization? Do I need mulching? And is that a sexual question? Okay, we need to end this. Just before we go, remember? Let's do our appeal.
Please support.
Please support us. Patreon. We gather both backslash Femsplainers. We need your support to keep going, or we can't keep going. And remember, we just recorded, and you guys will never know what we said unless you're a patron.
Yes, you don't get to
our
hear.
secret recording with Helen Andrews.
Where Zoe
Reveals something incredible that happened to her, and you won't know it unless you become a patron and support us. So
that's coming up. For
It's
the
really true,
Patreon
right?
supporters and no one else.
and we gather, patron subscribers, we gather. Patreon / Femsplainers. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Femsplainers. Stay with us by following us on Twitter and Facebook at Femsplainers and on Instagram at Femsplainers Podcast. You can always email questions and comments to contact@femsplainers.com. We read every one.
We are recorded at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C., and thanks to AEI Research Assistant Zoe Appler, who is our production assistant here in the studio, and thanks to Nat Frum, our audio and video editor, and occasional millennial mansplainer.
And listen to us on pretty much any of your favorite podcast platforms. And please remember to subscribe and like us at iTunes if possible. Every like helps us keep our solid 5-star rating. Cheers.